With the weather being a lot cooler, I think this is the perfect time to make tamales. Chicken tamales are one of my favorites, and I think they make the perfect gift for the holidays. Well, at least in my family. To get started, I will be using 1 tablespoon of chicken bouillon powder, or you could use salt to taste. I'm also going to be using 2 teaspoons of garlic powder, a half teaspoon of ground cumin, 1 teaspoon of black pepper, 1 bay leaf, 2 teaspoons of onion powder, 1 medium onion chopped, and 3 to 5 cloves of garlic. I'm using my 4.5 quart crock pot, and I'm going to place my chopped and sliced onions into the bottom. Then I am going to add around 3.5 to 4 pounds of boneless, skinless chicken thighs. Next, I'm going to add all of my seasonings. Now I'm going to cover with a lid, set my slow cooker to high, and cook it for 4 hours, and I will probably give things a stir at the halfway point. So now I'm going to prepare my corn husks. Here I purchased a ready-to-use batch of corn husks. It makes around 10 dozen. I'm not going to make 10 dozen tamales today, but I always like to pre-wash them because I find uninvited guests. And I will give a disclaimer. There's nothing against this brand of corn husk because I use whatever's available to me in my stores. And each time I've used different brands, I still pre-rinse them because of this reason. So I suggest you separate your corn husks and give them a good rinse. I'm going to rinse them twice, then they'll be ready to soak in hot water. Now, typically, I would just rinse them a couple of times, then fill my sink with hot water and allow the corn husks to soak for several hours in the sink, at least 1 hour soaking. But today I need my sink, so I'm actually going to rinse these twice and place them in a pot on the stove. So what I'm going to do is place all of my cleaned corn husks in this pot, and I'm going to bring it up to a boil. And once it's up to a boil, I'm going to submerge it with something heavy on top, cover it with a lid, and set it aside until I need it. And ultimately, you want the corn husk to be soft and pliable and able to fold it. So if it takes longer than an hour, so be it. My suggestion would probably be around 3 hours, and that's just what I'm going to do. So if you're preparing to make tamales, probably prep your corn husks first so you know by the time you need them, they are soft and pliable. So now that I've covered it with a lid, I'm going to set my corn husks aside to the back burner and move on to making my chili puree. Today I will be using a 1.5 ounce bag of Guajillo chiles. That is roughly 5 Guajillo chiles. I've removed all the seeds and veins and cleaned out the chiles. I also gave them a rinse because some of them had dirt near the stem area, so you might want to look out for that. So now what I'm going to do is submerge them in water and bring the water to boil. I am going to allow them to boil for around 5 minutes. Then I will remove them from the heat and allow them to soak for at least 20 minutes. They will probably soak longer until I need them. And I just want to make sure that they are soft and pliable so that I can blend them up into a puree. Now that my chiles have been soaking and are pliable, I am now going to blend them. I'm going to place them into the blender, and then I'm going to add a 1/3 cup of water so that they can blend and puree. I am now going to pour my puree through a sieve, and this will help me remove any chili flakes that did not get pureed. You don't have to do this. This is optional. It's just something I like to do. And to help sieve all of my puree, I am going to be adding a 1/3 cup of water. And I'm going to swish it around in the blender and pour it through the sieve, and then start pushing out the puree to get rid of any chili that did not get blended. Now that my puree is done, I'm going to set it aside until I need it. Okay, so my chicken thighs are done. I wanted to show you how tender and soft they became cooking in a slow cooker. They're falling apart. So what I'm going to do is just remove all of my chicken thighs from the crock pot, and then I am going to sieve any drippings and juices left in the crock pot, and that will go into my masa. Anything left in the sieve, as far as onions, garlic, or just anything that didn't go through the sieve into the liquid, will go back into my chicken, and I will work that in when it shreds. So after sieving all of my drippings, I am left with around 12 ounces of liquid, and this is perfect flavoring for my masa. Now I'm going to prepare my meat filling. I have chopped up all of my chicken thighs, and now I'm just going to add the chili puree. It's up to you how much you want to add. I probably added around a 1/2 cup to the chicken, and with my hands I'm just going to mix it and shred it into a fine shred. Now that my chicken is mixed, I'm moving on to the masa. Now, I like to use fresh masa, but for those of you that cannot get your hands on fresh masa, I decided to make it with Maseca. And you could use the regular Maseca, but this one in particular seems to be for tamales. So here I have around 6 cups of the Maseca in a large bowl. And I will say this, after trial and error, it seems to be for 6 cups of Maseca, or for each cup, you want a cup of liquid. So here I'm pouring a mixture of juices from the crock pot and some extra chicken broth, which made around 4 cups. I'm going to add it little by little and start to mix my masa. I'm also adding a ½ cup of melted lard. You could use vegetable shortening. Now, if you want to substitute the lard for oil, go right ahead, but I will forewarn you that it might change the texture of the tamale because, as you know, shortening does solidify and oil does not. So just try it, but in all honesty, I have never tried it with oil. Okay, so I've added my chili puree a little at a time, and now I'm mixing. So through this whole process, you're going to have to feel your masa. So again, ultimately, I ended up using in total around 6 cups of liquid, and that included drippings, extra broth, hot water, and the melted lard. One thing I do notice with working with Maseca as opposed to fresh masa is that Maseca dries out so easily and so quick. It really absorbs any liquid that you give it and it just dries out. So at this point, I think my masa is a good consistency and I want to taste it for salt. And to me, I think my masa needs some salt, so I'm going to add some salt to taste. At this point, I've added the rest of the chili puree to the masa, and in total, I probably mixed my masa for around 15 minutes. I'd like to also mention that this tamale recipe basically caters to what I like to make in my kitchen. And what I mean by that is that I make smaller, thinner masa tamales. And I think if you like the bigger size tamales, like some people in my family, then obviously the ratio of what I use will not make as many tamales as I get, because my tamales are on the smaller side and that's just what I prefer. So just keep that in mind. So at this point, I am ready to start making tamales. Here I have my corn husks, nice and pliable. I have my masa prepared. And I also have my meat filling, which happens to be chicken thighs. By the way, if you prefer chicken breast, you can use that as well, but I like the thigh. So now I am ready to start putting these tamales together. I'm going to take my corn husks, and for those of you who have never made tamales or are not familiar with it, you want to feel for the smooth side. One side is a bit bumpier and rougher than the other. Now, of course, they both do have bumps and a rough feel to it, but one is just a bit bumpier and rougher. You want to find the smoother side, and that will be the side that you spread your masa on. And again, I use a spoon, you could use a knife. There are even tamale spreading tools that you could purchase, but this is what's convenient for me. So I'm going to spread it, and I like a thin layer. Again, going back to preference. If you like more masa, go for it. But again, the end result might be different as far as how many dozens you get. So I like thin masa, a lot of meat in the filling, and then I'm just going to fold it over. And once I fold it over, I am going to fold it under towards the end, and that is my tamale. It's as easy as that. Now, I also wanted to show you that sometimes your corn husks will be too large for the size that you want to make your tamale. So all you have to do is just rip a little bit off the end until you find your desired size. And I also was going to edit this part out, but I thought, let's learn from my mistake. So as you can see, I'm struggling with my masa. And right about here, I realized I needed to add some more hot water, give it a mix to make it spreadable again like this. So if you find yourself in the same predicament, don't worry, add some hot water or some hot broth, mix it, and continue making your tamales. Okay, so I got around 3 dozen tamales out of this batch. I did have some masa left over, which I'll use for something else. So now I'm going to place my tamales in an 8-quart stock pot with a steamer basket. But if you don't have a steamer basket, you could also do what my grandmother used to do. And she used to place a bowl upside down at the bottom of her tamale pot, and actually it was larger, so it works better in a larger pot. And then she would put a plate on top of it and start stacking her tamales. But I don't suggest doing this method if your pot is shorter like this one, because it'll just take up all the space. So now before I place my steamer basket in the pot, I've added around 4 to 5 cups of water, or at least enough water that comes right below the steamer basket. You don't want water touching the tamales. And now I'm going to place a lid and start stacking my tamales around it. And I actually had an aunt that used to ball up aluminum foil to help guide her while she stacked the tamales in like that teepee pattern. So I have managed to fit 3 dozen tamales in my pot. So now I am going to take leftover corn husks and just cover all the tamales and tuck it in. I'm going to place a lid and bring my water to boil, lower the heat, and allow it to simmer and steam for an hour before checking my tamales. My tamales have been simmering and steaming for 1 hour, so now I'm going to check one to see if they are done. Now, the main indication to know if your tamale is not ready is if it still sticks to the corn husk. And as you can see, it is not easily coming out of this corn husk, and it's very sticky and tacky. So that is a good indication that it needs to cook longer. Okay, so I let it cook for an additional 45 minutes, and I actually let it set for about 15, and now let's see if it comes out easily. As you can see, my tamale came out very easily. My kitchen smells wonderful, and I'm ready to try it. It is absolutely delicious. I hope you give this recipe a try. I hope you like it, and thanks for watching.